Mhm. Mhm. All right, so for today's class on animation, it's a good idea for us to go ahead and get Unity to start creating a new project. And kind of similar to before, we're going to use a universal 3D project. So when you do select a new project, you're probably going to use the most recent editor version, click universal 3D, give it a name like, DNA animation or whatever works for you, and then click create project. And as usual, it'll take a little bit of time to set that up, and we'll have an intro discussion leading up to it. But one thing that's important is that, all right, class a week from today won't happen because I have a responsibility. I'm going to Copenhagen to do a workshop there. So that's November 21st. So that class won't happen. But then after that, the next Wednesday, we'll have our class on UI and a game manager. And then that'll be our last time meeting together here, because the following Wednesday, Game Habitat is having one of their playtest sessions here. And this place will be full of game developers showing off their stuff. And my intention was to invite you and say, hey, it'd be really cool to check it out. But it's so popular that it actually, the tickets, which are free, ran out immediately on the first day. And so that's how popular that event is. But what we'll do for the final project is, instead of getting together for a final project like we've done before, we'll do it online through Discord. So after the UI class, what I ask you to do is try to take everything you've learned and bring it together into something that resembles a game. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be your first game. But then you post it to the build to the Discord. I'll download your game and I'll play it and I'll give you feedback on it. And we'll talk about how, what the next steps will be. I'm also going to do some other workshops later on different topics. I actually recently did some workshops in Copenhagen on fundamentals of game design. And I did a workshop on 18 practical idea generation techniques. And both of those were really well received. And so I think I'll do those for you too, because they went over really well. And so we're already setting up our project. And what we're going to be doing, actually, we're not going to be starting from a blank slate. We're actually going to download this free Cinti Polygon starter pack that has all these interesting assets. And we're going to use those to animate. And like I said in the previous class, we're also going to create a trigger that will open a door, and it's going to animate it open and closed. And so we're going to need a third-person player controller, which we've used before. And so we'll add that to our project. So when our projects are done, after I've done this presentation, we'll import those. You can search for them on the asset store, but I can also send you a link if it's any issue. But we're going to set up simple animations, and you can actually do this in Unity. There's lots of other software for animating things. But one thing to note that is, you might have heard about animated movies, Pixar movies, Studio Ghibli, like all these different movies. Well, animating for games is very different. In general, a movie can animate a scene and have everything there, and they render it all out, and every frame can be perfect. But in a game, the player can do all kinds of stuff. So you have to animate. You actually wind up chopping up the animations into little pieces. And so in game animation, you got to be ready to respond to the player's actions in real time. Whereas in film and television, they can actually have everything figured out in advance, and they have storyboards and they follow it really straight and directly. And so, what we're going to show you is both how to set up a simple animation clip that just loops, but we also have something called an animation state machine, which is a way to switch from one animation to another. And that's how we'll handle the door. But there's this notion of loops and cycles. Some actions, like if you're running, if a player character is running, you're essentially just looping a short animation over and over again. The animation just does this, and then you loop that over and over, and you move it so that you match up the feet moving with the animation. And if you do it right, the feet will look like they're planting on the ground, but what's actually happening is the player is just scooting across the ground at the same speed that the legs are running. But getting all that to match up, especially for a humanoid character to look good, takes a lot of skill. And actually, animators for video games are actually one of the most sought after positions. And they actually, other disciplines, there's lots of artists, there's lots of game designers, but finding a really good animator for video games is actually pretty challenging. So you have to be ready for all the different ways that things can switch from animations. And they do something called animation blending, which means that if I'm going from running to turning, or if I'm going to run and then stop running, if you had one animation just immediately switch to another, it would seem really jarring. So what they do is they will blend animations, and sometimes they'll actually even have separate animation for the lower body compared to the upper body. But also game animation has to think about things like memory limits, polygon budgets, the number of bones. So there's actually, when you animate a character, there's individual bones that are being moved. It's all connected in the skeleton. Whereas TV and film animation don't really have to worry about that much. Or they use it, but they use it in ways that's much less restrictive. You also have to account for camera angles in games, and you'll animate the camera. For example, sometimes you're animating the camera with code. Sometimes you're doing it with a pre-made animation. But so for example, our third-person character has a camera attached that the player controls. But you might have a cutscene where you go into a cutscene and the camera pans around, and it's much harder to make that work cleanly and perfectly for games than it is for a movie. So what we're going to do first is we're not going to do anything as complex as animating a character. You'll work up to that. But one thing we will do is we will animate some simple objects. And the thing is, too, it's like if we have time and we get to that point, you can animate more than just position and rotation. You can animate a lot of different properties and even change color and do other things to draw attention. And a lot of these animations, so you can animate doors to open and close when the player approaches them. You can animate lights to turn on, turn off, or traffic lights to switch. You can animate moving platforms or different hazards. We've seen simple enemy animations in the 2D platformer microgame. You might animate pickups or power-ups to draw attention to them, or simple vehicles on splines going through the road, or combining things like maybe a cuckoo clock where the door opens and the cuckoo pops out, the cuckoo makes a sound and comes back. And so, but one of the things that we're going to have to do first is set this thing up. So let's see if our Unity, hopefully you're somewhere like, let's see, something like this, an empty 3D scene is where you should be. And what we're going to need to do in order to, to get the stuff that we need into the game, we need to go to the Unity Asset Store. So what you're going to want to do is, you go to the Unity Asset Store and you log in so that you're signed. The first thing to make sure is that you're signed in, because otherwise you'll find something and then you'll have to go through this process anyways. So if you're logged into the Unity Asset Store, and I'm not exactly sure why it went here. That's kind of weird. Let's see. Unity just had a big event, and I wouldn't be surprised if they changed some things around. Unity Asset Store. And so the first thing you're going to want to look for is that like Cinti prototype pack that's free. Cinti prototype. And you might have noticed if you were watching the Discord that I posted some links to Cinti's free assets. Cinti is actually a pretty big company that does a lot of business with assets. And this Cinti Polygon prototype pack, oh, here it is, the starter pack, the free one. You'll see that it says already purchased for me. If you click it and open it, you can buy it without having to actually provide any information or any money or anything. But once you do purchase it, if you click open in Unity, it'll hop over here to the package manager and you can import it And then you'll get this confirmation that's all, these are all the files it's going to import. Click import, and it'll bring the scene in. And so this is a fun scene to play around with and to prototype with. But actually, one of the first things that you'll wind up noticing, if you go to Polygon Starter and you go to the Scenes folder and you double click Demo, we're going to work from this demo scene, but you'll notice that we have that pink problem. So the materials for this, this thing need to be updated. And we've done this before. It's no big deal. Do you need me to wait up on y'all to? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So let's see, do you see if you go to, again, the Polygon Starter Scenes folder, there's a scene called Demo that you want to double click to open, and you'll get this big fuchsia nightmare. Yes, it looks. Does anybody remember how we fixed this problem? Because we've done it before. So what it is, it's a tool that they hide under, like there's a lot of tools under window, like a lot of the tools here for different things. And this is a rendering problem with how the material's rendering. So the hint is if we go to rendering, and we had to convert the material to a newer version. And so if we use render pipeline converter, that opens up this window. And what we need is the material upgrade tool. So if we check it, and then we click initialize and convert here, and it'll ask us about saving the scene, that's totally fine. And you'll get this in a second, it'll resolve, and you'll get this scene here. So now you should see something like this. So yeah, peek around while we're waiting and see what they have here, because actually, you can hold down the right mouse button and you can kind of fly around. You see they have these kind of cute pill-shaped characters. They've got some coins. There's a target. A little foreshadowing here. There happens to be an open door to this house. You have this really big question mark and some ramps. So in general, like this is a free pack that you could use, and you can imagine you could build, a test ground for, something we call a gym for like trying things out. So now we need a third person controller that we can use to be our player character, because you'll see that like we don't actually have something like that here. But actually, while we're here, let's go ahead. Like you might remember that I gave you a tip before that you might, if you do something that really messes up this scene, you don't necessarily want to save it over the only existing version of that. So the first trick is to do File, Save As, and in the Scenes folder, save a copy of this. And we can call this like, animation test or something similar. So now if we have a problem, if we mess something up in this scene significantly, we can go back to that demo scene and open it again. So we don't have to worry so much if we happen to accidentally delete some important stuff from the scene. It's kind of useful. So now you should have now the name of your scene should be something that you gave it, like animation test or similar. All right. So then now that we have our free Cinti prototype scene here, we need one more thing. We need to get the starter assets third person controller. Like, you can just search for starter assets third or something similar. And in the list here, you should find, you probably have downloaded this before, so it may say purchased. But there's starter assets third person, and it's free, and it's from Unity. So if we click that, and then we go over here, you get the open in Unity button. When we click on this, it opens it up in the package manager. And if we click import into project, we're going to get this, and this is totally normal. You need to install or upgrade some of the packages here in order to use it, which only takes a second. But then you need to wait. You're still going to have that window that tells you about all the items that you're importing. So yeah, it brings in the other packages that are missing, compiles everything. You can take a sip of your favorite beverage. Mine currently is something called Celsius, which is an energy drink. 0 sugar. All right, so now this is the next step, the last step in importing is this. This is all the stuff that will be imported. And so yes, we need to click the import button in here at the lower right. And that will import the third person character controller that we'll use. In third person, we could have used the first person controller, but the third person controller makes it a little easier to see where our character is, and that'll be useful when we set up this trigger that will open a door. All right, so now it says in project when it's done, and I can close the package manager. If I look in my project, now I have a folder called starter assets. And if I go into the third person controller folder and into prefabs, you see nested parent armature unpacked. Armature just means it's kind of it's a humanoid type character that has all legs and arms and stuff. If you want just a capsule version of that, it's here. And even if we pull this up, we should probably see a preview of this. Yeah, there it is. So you see that's the armature. It's like a robot looking thing. And then the capsule is just a capsule. It's looking slow to update, but yeah. So take the nested parent armature unpack prefab and drag it up here into your hierarchy. And then just as the name says, the first thing we're going to do is unpack it, which means we right click this and go to prefab, unpack. And it unpacks, and you've got these things here, which are other prefabs. We can actually get rid of some of this to clean it up because we don't need this UI canvas and we don't need this UI event system. We just need the main camera, player follow camera, and player armature. You can see it probably dropped it here somewhere in your scene. While we're at it, why don't we rename nested parent armature unpack into something that makes a bit more sense? Like, let's name that player. Now, if you try to run the game now, let's say we just want to, we see it's in here. Actually, it looks like it's partially submerged in the ground. So what we might want to do is pull it up so that the feet kind of just touch the ground. And I'm actually going to take the gizmos and reduce the 3D gizmo size because it's always so huge. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be like above ground because when the game starts, it'll drop down to the ground. You need any help? How's it coming over here? Remember, you can press F if you want to focus on something and zoom around it, holding Alt and left mouse clicking. You can place this guy anywhere that you like, actually. Now, if you go ahead, obviously you would want to press File, Save to save this now that you've made some changes. Now, if you play now, let's say we just want to try it first to see if everything's all right, you're going to immediately discover a problem. Besides the fact that the entire scene is in teal. But even once it starts, something's going on, and you don't have your character. You can move it around, but the camera is looking really weird. It's kind of fixed in place, and there's a reason for this. I'm going to hit Control P to exit play mode. We've got two cameras. You might even notice there's warnings that say there's two audio listeners because the audio listeners are on the camera. You see, the scene itself came with a camera right here, and we need to get rid of that camera. So let's get rid of the camera that was in the scene. Now we have demo objects, a sky dome, lights, and the player that we just added. Now let's save and try that again. So now we have what we would expect. We have a camera that sits behind the character. With the right mouse, or with the mouse itself, we can move the camera around, but it stays anchored to the camera. And then we can use WASD or the arrow keys to move around. You can even hold the shift to run. But you can see things have collision. We can jump up onto things. We can run around. We can enter this house and exit back. But you see, everything's static. Nothing's moving. So we're going to fix that. We're going to add some movement because there's things here that suggest they would move. Like these coins look like you could collect them, but most coins in games animate to show you that they are collectible. Yeah, Benjamin, what's up? Oh, so you're in play mode. So the first thing you want to do is exit play mode. I think you can hit Control P. There you go. So yeah, and so then you want to go and remove the. Yeah, so you have the same issue. So both Vincent and Leon, you still have your camera, the camera that came with the scene. So you want to find the camera that's up here at the top and delete it. So what happens is, let's see, you have this thing that says main camera here. So if you have two cameras in the scene, they're kind of going to fight. And so because your player comes with a camera, you want to get rid of the one that isn't attached to the player. And then you should have no problem running the game and walking around and seeing it should look something like this. All right. Anybody still catching up? Good. All right, well, the first thing we're going to do is that these coins here are just begging to be animated. You know, coins very often have some kind of form of animation. So if we click on a coin, we can see that it selects it here in the hierarchy and it's blue. That means the coin is a prefab. So one thing we know is if we want to edit a prefab, if we want all the coins to move, we should edit the prefab, not the instance that's here in the hierarchy. So to get to the prefab, an easy shortcut is when we have a coin selected, if you look here in the inspector, there's this button that says select. if you click that, the project window will jump to where that prefab is. So again, if you click here on the coin and click select, it highlights the actual prefab here in the project. Double click that and you'll open up the prefab view, which means that we're editing the blueprint or the base that all those copies are created from. So this is the thing that we want to animate. And so to animate, one of the things that we need to do is we need to get the animation window open. So if we go to Window, Animation, Animation. Now there's animator and animation. We'll get to this one next, but you want the animation window. And so that'll open up this. And it'll actually be helpful if we dock it next to like our console or other things down here at the bottom. So I'm going to make it so I can see mostly this window down here. And that's just going to make it a little bit easier for us to do the work that we're about to do. So then now that we have, if you have this selected and you have the animation window open, you'll see down here, it says to begin animating the prefab of the coin, create an animator and add an animation clip, and there's a create button. So actually, if we have this thing selected and the animation window is open, to create an animation clip, we can just click create here. Now what we want to do, we want to stay organized. So let's go up to assets. You see we're down in prefabs now. If we go up to assets, you can see there's the scenes setting. Let's create a folder here called animations. Animations. And then open up that folder. Yeah, no worries, no worries. So what you did was, starting from this window where you have the coin selected, you click create here in the animation window. And then you go to assets and you create a folder called animations. So if you right click, if you're on PC, I don't know about you Mac guys, but basically create a folder in assets called animations. And then open up that folder, and of course it's empty. There's a new folder button. There you go. See, I'll learn how to work on a Mac along the way too, helping out these Macintosh people. So yeah, once you've created a folder named animations, now you see down here, you can give your new animation a file name. And since we're going to make this coin spin, I'm going to name my animation coin spin. And I got a capital C and a capital S. So coin spin, and then press save. And now your animation window changes a bit to look like this. I'll try to push this all the way over so I can see as much of this animation window as possible. So now we have, you can see here it says coin spin. That's the animation, but currently there's nothing going on with this animation at all. In order to animate, we have to create what are called keyframes. And there's a couple different ways to do this. But the first thing is we have to decide what we actually want to animate. So this animation window has this button here. This big button says Add Property. Click it, and you'll see these are all the components that are on this object. And you can open them up. So for example, I can open Transform, and you can see I can animate position, rotation, or scale. And if I want to choose rotation, I click the plus sign here next to it. And that adds rotation to here. If we click this down arrow to open it up, you see we can rotate X or Y or Z. And you also see that it automatically created these diamond shapes, and these are keyframes. You have one at 0, and you have one here at 1 second. You can see there's time marked across the timeline here. And so these are essentially frames leading up to a second. You see if I scrub along this top, this number here changes to tell me where you're at in the timeline. But currently, if I press play, it plays in loops, but nothing's happening because we haven't made any changes. Now let's look at this a little bit more closely too. You see we can play the animation clip by using this. We can use this button to go to the previous keyframe. In this case, it goes to the beginning. We can use this button to go to the next keyframe, which is the one at the very end. So what we want to do is we're going to start here at a rotation of 0. If we go to the keyframe at the end, we want to rotate in Y all the way around, which how many degrees are in a circle? Exactly, Benjamin, 360. So when we're at this far, we're at that keyframe, if we type 360 into rotation Y, and then we scrub along here, it actually rotates. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. What I would say, it looks like you accidentally added some other keyframes as well. So what I would do is Control Z until you have no more keyframes. Exactly. So now what happened? All right. What's happening to you right now is it's adding keyframes where that line is. And so what you want to do before you do this, do Control Z to undo that, to get rid of those keyframes that you added. Now press the button that goes to the end, that one. So now, exactly, now is where you want to type 360. So what Benjamin was experiencing is that if you have this line that represents where you're currently at, and you make any change here, it's going to add keyframes there. And so he needed to undo, because we don't want to add keyframes here in the middle. We want to make the change here at the end. And the easiest way to make sure we go there is by clicking the button here. So now, if you click to go to the beginning keyframe, these should say 0. Click to the ending keyframe, rotation Y should say 360. And if we press play, it loops and it rotates. If we wanted it to rotate the opposite direction instead, if we went to the end and put a negative in front of 360, now it'll rotate the other direction. But there's something that I don't like about this rotation. Anybody want to guess? Yeah, Benjamin, what do you think? Yeah, there's like a hesitation that happens. Instead of continuous motion, we're getting this hesitation, and it happens in between the end and the beginning, right about now. And so let's stop playing your animation. And the reason this happens is because of something that Unity automatically does. And that's called easing. It's automatically easing in to a keyframe and easing out of the one at the end. But we can change that so that we get smooth motion. So what I want you to do is click on this keyframe here, and you see how it turns blue? That's how we know we're working with it. Now if you right-click and go to both tangents, the thing at the bottom, and then change that to linear. And now go to the end keyframe and click on it so that it turns blue, and do the exact same thing, both tangents linear. So now when you play, it no longer has that hesitation. It just continuous and smoothly loops. So yeah, so Benjamin was asking, like, well, why do we have so many dots here? Let me help explain that. So you have a keyframe because you're animating rotation. It automatically adds a keyframe for X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation. And if you click up here, you actually get, you're selecting everything. I think you might even have to double click it. You see, I can even click and drag these and move them around. Technically, we don't actually need these keyframes, this one here and this one here, because we're not actually making a change, but we can leave them there. But you could even hit, I think, delete, and it wouldn't change anything if I were to delete this and this. So now, let's see, I think I have to click this again. Or it looks like somehow I broke something. Let's see, what did it do? Let's go back to this keyframe. It set this to 360. Sometimes Unity does some weird stuff. All I did was delete those keyframes, but you see it set this to, this first one to -360 as well. It got a little confused, but now let's see. That's what I was expecting. But the point is, you don't actually have to delete those, and sometimes it's a little easier just to let them be. So now if I go back, so you should be in the position where you have a smooth rotation like this. Now, if we actually don't, because we're editing the prefab, we don't actually even need to go back to the scene here to see it work. Actually, from here, if you just press play to go into the game, you should see this change. And so if I look over at the, coins, not only is one of the coins animating, now all the coins are rotating like this. So we added an animation to the prefab version of the coin, and all the instances of the coin in the scene are now rotating. Now for me, the speed of the rotation feels a little fast. I tend to think of rotating coins as being like maybe like half as fast as that. But that's pretty easy to fix. So let's stop the game. And then we'll go back to our coin. If we click on the coin, let's see, and we see, like if it doesn't appear down here, click it again. Now, what we want is for it to do the exact same thing, but take twice as long to do it. Y'all doing all right? You have any questions? Okay. So we want this same rotation. We don't need to change this, but we want it to take twice as long. That'll slow it down. Now, we only see from 0 to 1 second on this timeline. So we need to see more of the timeline to do that. What we can do is if we put our mouse over the timeline and we use the middle mouse button to scroll, let's see. Oh, you're kidding me. This worked when I tried it at home. Let's see. So normally, if you put your middle mouse button over this thing and scroll, actually, here it is. So it wasn't working when I did it here on the timeline, but if I do it down here, if I use middle mouse button and scroll, I start to see more of the timeline. You can even drag these things down at the bottom to adjust the amount of timeline that you're seeing. So now I can see that, like, okay, my animation plays for 1 second, but what I'd instead like it to do is to play for 2 seconds. And as I mentioned, if you click here at this top diamond, you select all the keyframes in that column, and I can drag this out until I get to 2.00. And you see it's telling me where it's at, giving me kind of like some feedback there. So now it's at 2 seconds. If I play it, I'm like, oh, all right, that's much better. That's a slower, less frantic rotation. Now if I stop and go and play, I should see that the other coins are animating similarly. Yep, so there's my coins. Oh, that's much smoother. So what's nice about animation is any kind of movement is really good for drawing the player's attention. So you probably don't want a crazy busy scene with a lot of things animating. You want to pick the things that you want to draw attention to and animate them, and then it becomes much easier to find them. So that is simple animation of coins, a rotation. But now let's take it a step further. If we look, let's go back to our scene. So if we're in prototype view, you'll need to click on this or this to go back to the scene. And let's take a look around. We have this door. So it's already open. Why don't we make it so that this door can be closed and will open when the player approaches it by stepping into a trigger, and if they pass through the trigger, it'll close behind them, which is a very common thing to do in games. And it's going to allow us to learn about how to use animation state machine using the animator inspector. But the first thing we want to do is let's go ahead and close this door. The door is open. What we can do is either, I think if we zero out this rotation, it's just going to be like this. I think the closed door is actually -90. So that's probably the easiest way to make sure the door is closed. You could also use the rotation tool to rotate it. And now something to know is that if for some reason you get a strange rotation, it might be that your object isn't rotating from the hinge back there. Maybe if it's actually accidentally set to center, you're rotating around its center. But for a door like this, you want it sent to its pivot, and the people who created the door made the pivot on the side where the hinges are. How do you switch between those two? Oh, how do you make it? So when you create this 3D object, you can set where the pivot is. And so, for any 3D object, if you have this set to center, it's rotating or doing things from the center. But the pivot is something that you can set when you create the 3D object, and you can change it. And so, for example, the pivots on characters' arms are set specifically. They're not in the center. You can actually control where something rotates from or where it scales from. And that's the pivot. And so that's really useful to know. So if you're creating a door for your house, you would want to make sure to set the pivot to be, essentially over here so that it will rotate from that position. So let's get our door where the rotation is set to -90 so that it's closed. Now, if you look, remember, now we're in the scene view. We don't need to go into prefab view. We're going to animate this door right here in the scene view because it's easy for us to see where we need to rotate it to. So if we look in our animation window, we can begin animating by creating a clip here by clicking create. And again, we now, if we go up to assets, we have this animations folder. So let's create an animation called open door. Capital O, capital D. And again, we have our timeline. And so what we want to do, we're going to do exactly what we did with the coin, which is we need to choose a property we're going to animate. And if we click add property, open transform, we're going to animate its rotation. So we click plus there. And so we see that it adds these keyframes, and the first keyframe, the rotation of Y, is already set to where the door is at right now, which is good. And then what we want to do is we want to go to the end keyframe, and the easiest way there is to go click this button for next keyframe. And now we can even use our rotation in the scene to rotate this. Although, and you'll see it actually changes here. So kind of, you probably don't want the door to be like 180 degrees open. That looks really weird. Most doors kind of open about this far. So find some place where it makes sense the door opens. You'll see that that changes the value of Y here. And if we scrub here, let's see, you might have to click on the door. I think actually, yeah. All right, you're like, well, wait. I rotated the door when I was here, but it didn't change that value. You could type it in, but there's actually a way that we can make this work the way we want it to. And that's using this record button. See, if you want to make a change, if you want it to set keyframe values while you're making changes in the scene, you use this record functionality. So again, make sure you're at the last keyframe. This time, press the record button. You see how it turns red and the entire timeline turns red? Now, if we pull that rotation out here and get it where we like it, it's going to stick. Now, if we switch to playing, you'll see that this door loops opening. So the door opens the way we want it. The looping part is not going to work for us, but we're going to fix that. That's something we'll actually set in the clip, when we make this adjustment. Now it's really important that we stop enable it. We click enable disable on the record. Now, if you forget and leave this open, and then you go to somewhere and you make changes, you'll notice that it automatically adds keyframes every time I make a change because the record button is on. And then you might get weird behavior like this. Of course, at that point, you can just Control Z to get back to where it seems to be doing what you want it to. And so at the beginning, it's set to -90. At the end, it's set to something that seems reasonable for a door to be open at. So, but one of the things that I'll draw your attention to now is that when you might not have noticed it before, but when we created this animation clip on this door or even on that coin, if we close these other components, you'll see that a new component was actually added. And it's called the animator. It's the animator component. This is not the same as animation. And actually, it's not actually enabled right now either, because we're technically just playing an animation on this thing. But if we enable it, and if we double click where it says controller, it opens the animator window. Remember we talked about that. So what we'll do is, let's make some space and let's drag this animator window over here to the side so we see it kind of next to our scene. So, because we want to be able to see the door, but it's also useful to look at this animator window. And if we select our door, we see our animation. And we can look at this animation clip. Let's actually, before we make any changes, what we can do is we can play the game. And if we have the door selected in the scene, we'll see the animator actually changing. You see how, if I click in the scene here, the door is opening. And with the door is actually selected now, and that's why you see this open door animation keep playing over and over again. Those two are connected, and that's one of the things that can help you understand what's going on and debug problems if you have them. But the power of what you can do with this animator isn't just playing a single animation. What this animator does is it switches between animations. So one of the things that we're going to want to do is we can start with an animation of this door that is we don't want this, when the game starts, currently, the door just starts opening over and over and over again, which is not what we want. We want, when the game starts, for the door to stay shut and only open when we trigger it to do so. So to do that, we should create an animation clip for the door that is essentially the door just closed without any motion. So let's see, what we'll do is, we're going to create a new animation, and we can do that right here in the animation window. You see where it says open door? If you drop this down, it lists all the animations that are on this door, and also there's an option for create new clip. So if we click that, we're in the animations folder. Let's, we'll say door, we'll call this animation door idle. An idle is a common term for something that is just in its starting state without moving. We won't call it door closed because we're actually going to animate the door closed with a different animation clip. So if we create door idle, click save, we don't actually need to do anything else because the door idle doesn't do it's not going to change. It's just the door in its starting state. But if you look in the animator, that door idle animation clip is now in the animator. And so what we want is, you see this thing that says entry, that means when the game starts, it's going to follow this line and do whatever is at the other side of that line. So instead of when the game starts having the door open repeatedly, let's have it go to door idle. And the way you do that is you click on door idle, right click, and click the very first thing that says make transition. Or no, second one. Set as layer default state. So essentially, now on entry, it should play door idle. So let's click and see if that's what actually happens. So if I look in my scene view, I mean, you can also look in the game view, you can peer over at the door. But so what you'll see is that, okay, on entry, it's playing this door idle, which is the closed state of the door. All right, cool. And so then what we want is, we want there to be a way to transition from the door idle, which is the starting state, to open door. So to go from door idle to open door, we create a transition. If you click on door idle, you right click and click make transition. Now you got this line that's attached to the mouse. We drag it up to open door and click once, and you have now a transition. So now there's a way for us to go from door idle to open door. But it won't automatically do that. You have to tell it when to do that. And the way that we do that is with a parameter. So you see up here at the top, you have layers and parameters. Right now we're on layers. If you click parameters, this list is currently empty. Click the plus button, and we'll choose. You might remember from our programming class that we had floats and ints and bools. So this is a variable, something we can set in script. And a bool is what is useful for us to know. If we click new bool and name this, for example, door open, just to make it different than the name of you know, we could even change this, let's see, let's delete that and name it, we'll name it is door open. Even that's a bad name, come to think of it. You know, because I mean, bools you often are like, is something, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, we want it to do something. So we could actually say, bool, open the door. That seems like it can work. I think there's probably an even better name for that. But let's go with open the door. So this is a bool called open the door. And by default, it's set to false. That means there's nothing here. If we click it, that changes it to true. So what we want to do is we want to make it, if we pull over the inspector here, if we click, you know, you notice that if you click here in the empty space, that nothing's selected, nothing in the inspector. But if we click on the transition line connecting door idle to open door, now information shows up over here. And there's a conditions field. So the point is, to make the transition from door idle to open door, we can add a condition. If we click plus, it actually automatically adds open the door. And so you can think of this as, if open door is set to true, then make the transition from door idle to open door. And so if we play now, nothing's going to happen. But this is another place where this, this window comes in common. Like, switch to the scene view over here so you can see the door. you'll see that door idle is playing, but the parameter here, open the door, we can click this and make it true now. And if you wait a moment, it starts playing the open door animation. It transitioned from door idle to open door. Now there was a delay, and that's the reason is because of this checkbox here, have exit time. So if we stop this and we uncheck has exit time, let's try that same experiment again, and this time the door should open instantly. Has exit time means it's going to wait until the first animation plays before it starts playing the second one. But now, the moment I click this, the door opens, and it keeps opening. So let's fix that thing next. So the problem is that our open door animation clip keeps looping. If we click on it here, we get some information, and we see that like this state connects to this animation open door. So if we double click that, or if we click this, it highlights it over here in the project. If we click it in the project, one of the parameters that appears in Inspector is loop time, and there's a check. If we uncheck loop time, now when we're playing this thing, if we tell it to transition from door idle to open door, it opens and it stays open because it's no longer looping. So the way that I did that is I first have to find that clip in the project. So the easy way to do that is clicking this open door node, which contains this open door animation. And when I click it, you see it appears or it highlights it here in the project. Then I click on open door to see its properties, and this loop time checkbox was the thing that we changed. So now essentially we are able to use a variable called open the door, and when we set open the door to true, it will make this transition. So now let's apply what we learned in the previous class to make sure that we can open the door using a trigger. We're going to write a script, a very simple script. It's actually super duper simple. It's really easy. But one of the first things we're going to do is we want to be able to attach this script and a trigger to something near the door. We can attach it to the door, but we might want to adjust it, move it around. And so what we'll do is we'll create an object called a door controller that will hold the script and the box collider that we'll use as a trigger. So here in the hierarchy, if you have these things open, collapse it so you can see some of this space. Now right click here and click create empty. So this is an empty game object. We call it door controller. Let's see, and this thing, and it creates it at a weird place, of course, as it normally does. You can hit reset to get that over here, and what you want to do is kind of move that, move it kind of near the door. The easy way to do that is to make sure that you see this orientation widget from our toolbar of toolbars. If you go to isometric and look down at the top, it makes it easy to kind of use the stairs to position it roughly where the stairs are. And then we can look at it from the top and see, oh, well, it's way below the ground. Let's adjust it like that. And if we look at it all around and use F to focus on it, you know, something like right there is good. So it matters because we're going to attach a box collider to this thing that's going to be the trigger that the player walks into, and it will cause the script to execute and open the door. So you have your door controller that only has a transform component. You put it here near the front door, maybe kind of down at ground level. So now what we need, you know, for me,
This is at roughly like position 9.5, 0, 3.25, if it helps. But what we need now is a box collider that we're going to use as a trigger to detect when the player walks into it. It'll be invisible, the player won't see it. But this is how we will tell the script that's attached to it the player has entered the trigger. So with door controller selected, click Add Component and type Box. And you'll see Box Collider and Box Collider 2D. This is a 3D game, so you want the 3D shaped box collider. And that creates a box collider component. Now, if you don't set this to is trigger, then when the player hits it, it'll just run into it like a wall. But if we click this button here to set it to is trigger, it won't collide with the player. Instead, it'll send a message that the player has entered it. So now we can kind of raise it up. You see, you can kind of tell when it's above the ground. And we want to make this trigger a bit bigger. In particular, we're thinking about when the player enters the trigger walking towards the door, we want to open the door with plenty of extra time. If we click this button here next to Edit Collider, you see the collider gets these dots. I can zoom up and I can pull this up. I can pull this forward. And I'm like, okay, with the moment the player's collider touches this trigger, it'll fire off the script. And so if we have it like roughly here, and then the other thing that we're going to do is we're also going to make it so when the player exits the collider, that the door will close. So we want it to be a little bit into the house like this. So if I look at it from the top, it's roughly the same amount, when the player approaches, they'll touch the trigger, the door will open with time before they actually get to it, so they won't get clobbered by the door. And then they'll walk through it. When they exit the trigger, the door will close. If you want to, you can make it a little wider to help with approaches from the sides. I can switch to perspective to take this for a different look. And then when you're done, if you want to, you can uncheck Exit Collider, although it'll also do that when you just click off of it. So now we can see. So if you can't see this for some reason, then you probably don't have your gizmos showing. And so, for example, let's see. So gizmos, kind of hard to see over here because it's hidden. This is the gizmos button. This is what allows you to see the camera frustrum, the area the camera sees. It allows you to see the collider. So you need to toggle that so you can see it. All right. So now we need to create the script that is going to trigger this. And let's again start in our project window and create a folder to make ourselves organize. If we collapse these folders, we keep our folders in the root. We have animations here, we have scenes. So we can right click on assets and click create folder, and we'll call this scripts. And that's where we want to put our scripts. You can organize things later as you go on, but it's a really good idea to stay organized early on. It's less stuff to clean up later. So in the scripts folder, it's empty. If you click where the emptiness is and you right click and click create mono behavior script. And we can also name this door controller. Makes sense. It might wind up controlling multiple doors. And that would allow us to reuse it for any door that we needed to detect the player stepping in and open the door as a result. Chances are your level might have multiple of these. So it takes a second to do that. Now double click door controller script and it should open in your programming IDE like Visual Studio or something similar. So we actually won't need start function or update function. So we can highlight those and just click delete to get rid of them. And it's just kind of an empty class. You should see public class, door controller, and Visual Studio telling you about updates. Blech. Well, what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to do two things. We're going to need to detect when the player steps into a trigger. And then we also need to say when the player does, we want to change that variable that we used in our animator. And so if you type capital O, N, on, capital T, R, I, you start to see on trigger enter. Double click that. On trigger enter. This is called when a collider enters the trigger. And so whatever script whatever game object we put the script on, this script will listen if a collider enters the trigger. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really weird. So that's the autocomplete. Oh, let's see. Try typing this. So you might need to, if you type private void on tree, do you get anything like that? Private, ATE. Oh, actually, at this point, you've actually deleted everything in your class. You gotta do it. You might want to Control Z and get to the point where you need to have this thing on the outside, public class door controller. So make sure that you're at this point. So, and that might have been part of the problem. Okay. Yeah, so now type private. Yeah, lowercase, there you go. And then space, void, VOID, and then space, and then capital O, N. So does it start working now? So it looks like, actually, it may be because of this. What is that? Click on it. That is some really crazy stuff. Let's see. It looks like you might have, but it's probably referring to this because you don't yet have a valid thing. It's really weird that your autocomplete isn't working though. Has it ever worked? That's a setup problem. Oh wait, well what I'll do is I'm gonna help you out. So on trigger enter. The other thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write what you're going to need and I'm going to paste it into the Discord and have you copy paste it back. We're going to need a reference to a public animator and we're going to call it door animator. You see, so you say it never worked. Is that right? I mean, what I would probably try to do is reinstall, like go to the Unity install, and then, for example, what I would recommend is if you go here and you go to installs, and this is your version of Unity, you have manage, and then I think you can either try add modules, and usually that's where you find like whatever you're using for your IDE, and you could uninstall, reinstall it. Or at the worst, what I would do is like completely uninstall Unity and reinstall it. I'm very curious why. I mean, obviously you're on a Mac and that might have something to do with it. But let's see if we can make this work with me providing you with this stuff. So essentially, let's see. So on trigger enter door animator dot set bool. And then we're going to give it the name of the bool, which is open the door, and we're going to set it to true. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to I'm going to copy this, this whole thing in here and paste it into the Discord. So if you look in the Discord for this class, you should have the entire contents of this that you can copy and paste into your IDE, and then we'll see if that actually, are you, Victor and Leon, are you two having the same problem where you don't have the autocomplete? Like if you start trying on trigger. Yeah. So now, did that work for you? If you hit or save, does it still say there's a project? It doesn't look like you have any error. Um, I mean, it doesn't show any errors here in this thing. Now, if you switch back to your project, so if you have any errors here, like once it compiles, so if you go to console, do you have anything there? No. So it looks like it worked for you. It's just that they call it IntelliSense in Visual Studio. It's the thing that does autocomplete. And so yeah, that really sucks that it's not working for you. And I think that you might want, although, well, because you're on a Mac, it may be the Visual Studio. I'd be curious when you like all right, if you go to open up your Unity hub and click on installs, and then go to your Unity version, click manage and add modules, and then let's see what it shows under DevTools. Manage modules. So you have Visual Studio Code, which is what it's using, and it's installed. So for some reason, your Visual Studio Code IntelliSense isn't working. And so one of the things that I would do, for example, is I would go to like ChatGPT and look that up and say like, let me see if I can even do something like that here. Because ChatGPT can be really useful for debugging Unity kind of stuff. Like in Unity 6 on Mac, my Visual Studio Code doesn't have IntelliSense working. Any idea why? All right, I mean, it gives a bunch of information here about, so essentially what I would recommend is you can try to do some of the things that are recommended here. So for example, I can paste this into the chat, which is going to be, yeah. Here we go. So there's a file. So there's some tips there, but I think it's something that might take a little bit longer. So what I'll do is in the meantime, I'll send you any of the clips we're going to use. We're not actually going to write much more code than this, but there's a bunch of suggestions there for what might fix it. And it might just be something that you can figure out on your own, or that one of these tricks winds up working. You know what it probably is it's probably autocomplete's probably working for any of the basic C# stuff, but it's not working for the Unity specific stuff like mono behaviors. So essentially, like this on trigger enter is like a Unity thing, but if you start to type, for example, like float, and it works, like that's a basic C# command, or I don't know, like a list or something like that, but if you don't see things like yep, you see, that's all the basic C# stuff. So it seems like the Unity specific IntelliSense stuff isn't working for you. But let's see, this should work as it currently stands. So like if you can copy paste the code over, let's see if we can get this to work here in, so what we need is we have our door controller script, but we need it on our door. It's not there yet. Actually, we need it on our door controller, to be honest. If we click door controller, you can either drag that script onto it, or you can click add component and type door controller and find it that way. So our door controller needs our door controller script on it, and then we need to have the doors animator component referenced here. Easy way to do that is to click this thing here, and you can find SMBLD Door 01. File save. So now, if we click on this, yeah, that's our door, all right. And our door controller, so our door controller has this this thing right here. And let's see, if we play the game, I was having an issue where when this started, the door was opening automatically, but no, it's cool. Okay, so now the question is, as a player, I want to walk into that trigger and I'm hoping to see the door open. Let's see if this happens. And it did. Of course, it stays open. And so what we want to do is we want to make it so the door will close when we exit the trigger. But that's easy enough to do. Benjamin? Also, you want SMBLD door 01 as the, you see it's the second underneath player armature. I mean, technically, the other thing you could do is if you were trying to find, the reason I search for it that way is that, if you click on the door here to get to that component, to drag and drop it, then the inspector loses that. So if you want a sneaky trick for fixing that, you can actually open a second inspector window and lock this one so you don't lose it. But that's the easier thing to do. But I can show you that really quick, actually. Let's say if we click it, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to have the door controller not lose its inspector when I click off of it. And if I click this lock here, that'll be that way. So now this will always show the door controller no matter what, because I clicked the lock. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to be able to select this and drag the door animator into here. But now I need an extra inspector window to see the properties on that. I can actually do that. I can click here and I can do Add Tab Inspector. So now I've got two inspectors. I have the one that's locked to the door controller. Now I have the door. I can select here. So now I could take this animator component that I want here. I could drag that and drop it there. That's totally optional, but that can be something where, okay, it's not uncommon that you need to drag something from one inspected object to another, and when you click on it, if you only have one inspector, you keep switching over to the other thing. So I'll go through that one more time, actually. So if I close this, so the problem I had was I wanted the door controller to stay selected. If I click on the door, now I can't inspect the door controller. If I switch to the door controller, now I don't have the door. I need to drag a component from the door to the door controller. The way I can lock the inspector to the door controller so it doesn't change is click this lock. Then now if I click on this door, this doesn't change. But now I need to see the properties here, so I need a second inspector window. If I right click here, or I can click here, I think this is Panels Inspector. Oh, that didn't open it. I can do click Add Tab Inspector. So now I can drag this here. I have two inspector windows, one that's locked to the door controller, one that I can use to select the door. And the reason I needed to do that is because I need this animator from this door to drag and drop into this field on the door controller script. So if, for example, if this wasn't already filled, if this was set to none, and I want this to go here, now I can drag and drop this from there to there. And then I can say, oh, well, I don't need this anymore, I'll close it. And this doesn't need to be locked anymore. So now it's the case that we can step into our trigger and we can go through the door here and it opens. But we want the door to close now behind us. My mother always taught me to close the door behind me so that all the air conditioning doesn't leave the house. So this is actually pretty easy to do. We're just going to kind of go through this whole process again. Yeah. Well, your variable for set bool, there's a capital T, capital D. I think that's all you have. I think that's your only problem. Try that.
Is that dependent on if you named it that.
Exactly. So in our script here, well, the thing here, oh yeah, it has to be the case that whatever this is, it needs to be exactly that same thing here. This is called a referencing something by a string, and that's probably the worst way of doing things. It's sometimes necessary, but here's a trick. And if you actually want to make sure you get exactly what you typed here, if you double click on the parameter, you can actually copy this, Control C. And then I switch over here, and if I paste it, I get exactly that thing. So that can be a useful trick to make sure that because if you do one letter wrong, then this command won't work correctly because you're setting that very specific thing. This is the same as this. So, and that's where you're getting the reference here. So essentially, like whatever you drag and drop in that field becomes the contents of this variable. And that variable needs to be this. So you're saying, okay, for the animator called door animator, you're going to set the bool. And so like if I start typing it, if you have, until this is working, you do door animator and it automatically autocompletes. And if you type a period, you can see you have set bool, set float, set exec, those other things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Benjamin.
Error says
unassigned reference. Yes, that means that you haven't set this up in the, if you have an error that says unassigned reference, that usually means that you didn't fill in this field here. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that, okay, your door controller should have the door controller script on it. And if it's, what you probably have is, this is probably empty. See what building door 1. Exactly. Interesting. You have a second one. You might have duplicated your door. Keep an eye out for that. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, it looks like you were missing a semicolon in your script. So if you switch over to your script, let's see. Oh, at the end of door animator there. See the blue one? Yep, we need a semicolon there. You eventually get to the point where it becomes easier to spot those things and you recognize those red errors. All right, excellent. So now we're gonna take the next step and we're gonna make this door close. So what we're gonna want to do is we're gonna create a new node like this in our animator called close door, because we want to transit. What happens is we enter and the door is just sitting there idle, and then we transition to open door and the door stays open. Now we want to transition to a closed door node, and we'll actually use the same clip and we'll just run it backwards. But what we do is we start by creating a new empty node here. If we right click here and do create state empty, and it gives us a new empty state like this. And if we name this closed door, so that it's the opposite of open door. So now we have a state. So these aren't actually animations, they're states, and they have a reference to the animation. So what we can do is we can pick our animation here. For example, what we want is open door, but we'll change the speed to -1, and that will make it run in reverse. And so that's an economical way to reuse an animation that you already made, rather than creating a closed door animation. So now we need to create a transition from open door to closed door. So what we do is we right click on open door. We're dramatic pause to catch up. No worries. This is good. Let's see. And this is a lot of stuff to take in. So just know that you'll have the video to refer to, and it'll take a couple of tries to get used to it. So we have our open door, we have our closed door state that has our open door animation running backwards. So now we need to transition from open door to closed door. And we make a transition by right clicking on it, click make transition. We have this arrow, and then we click on it. So we want to transition from open door to closed door. But now, if we just left it like that, the door would close and there's no way it can open again. So we want to, now we can create a transition back from closed door to open door. Now we've created a loop by which if the door is closed, it can open. If the door is open, it can close. We just need to set up these two transitions to work with the variable that we already have. And also remember that if we don't want it to lag a bit, we also need to uncheck has exit time. So if we select our first transition from open door to closed door, uncheck has exit time, and then we add a condition, and we want it to go from open door to closed door when open the door is set to false. Then for the transition back, uncheck has exit time, open the door is true. And so now we've got a loop here. And so let's double check. We'll take a look at our game window. Let's also save. It's not a bad idea. And let's see if this actually works. So now, when I walk my character over here to the door, I can see that the door opens. Now the important part is when I walk out of the trigger, it doesn't close. And that's not a problem with our animation setup. It's actually that we need to tell our script that I've exited the trigger, because our script only has on trigger enter. There's actually a version of this called on trigger exit. So I will share this with you as well, of course. So if I choose on trigger exit, then we will copy this and paste it and set it to false instead of true, and then save. And so what I'll do is I will copy and paste this entire thing into the Discord, and then I'll come give Benjamin a hand. Let's see, so there you go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that I can probably guess. So you have your default state of your variable set to true. Now I'll try it this time. So yeah, you can actually set the state of the variable in the animator. And you don't want that. That's an easy thing to do accidentally. So now, there you go. So now try to set up the exit. So you'll need to add on trigger exit to your existing door controller script. And this time you'll be setting the bool open the door to false. So now when I switch back and I give this a shot, it should be the case that I can walk into the door and it opens. Ugh, maybe I should make that trigger bigger or have the door open faster. But now when I exit the trigger, the door closes. And most importantly, if I re-enter the trigger, it opens. And then when I've walked out on this side, it closes. Yay! So now you've kind of extended your programming knowledge to be able to know, what we're doing here. Actually, let's see. We're using on trigger enter and on trigger exit to set this door animator's bool. But you can use on trigger enter to do anything. You could say on trigger enter, spawn a bullet or spawn a prefab. What we did in the previous class. What did we say? It was object dot. Was it game object? Or no, it was object dot game object dot. I forget what it was. Does anybody remember? Instantiate, yeah, and exactly. So we could instantiate something when you enter the trigger. We could game object dot destroy when you exit a trigger. We could spawn enemies when you enter a trigger. So you can use these on trigger enter and on trigger exit to do all kinds of cool stuff. And so let's see. Well, I'll save that. Now there's one more thing I wanted to show you how to animate while we're here, which is that, so we animated coins to spin and we animated a door to open, but those are both animating rotations. But if you look at this, this question mark here, maybe that's something special like a tutorial and we could animate the scale, exactly, Benjamin. But there's something else we can animate too. In fact, you can animate many different properties on any of the components attached to an object. If I select this question mark and I create an animation clip and put it in animations and say question mark glow. So now anything that's attached to, most components attached to an object can be animated. If we click add property, if you go to the mesh renderer component and open it, you can actually see that there's a material base color. If we try to animate the material base color, if you just put your mouse cursor here in between the name of something and the value, you can drag it to change it, and you should actually see. Let's see. Do I not have this? Let me see. Why does this not work? Because it worked before. Let's see. See, I could have sworn I actually I did this. Maybe I'm animating the wrong thing. Let's see. I scroll through here. We did state machines. We go to the material properties. Yeah, base color. You have a problem. All right, well, let's look at that. Let's see. What's your problem? All right, so now if you click on your transition, click on the up arrow. Let's see what that's actually set to. All right, so, well, it looks like because you gave it no condition, it's just automatically jumping. So that's what you're missing, is you're missing conditions. Apparently, with no condition, it just says, I'm going to do this the moment. So the problem that, that we faced here in the classroom was that if you don't set the condition here for a transition, the transition will happen automatically. And now I'm still confused why I can't get the property of this. There you go. Where's that thing? If I select all these, delete. Aha, that's weird. So it worked when I deleted the other. Oh, I wonder if was I not? Now it's working. That's ridiculous. All right. So what I was trying to show you was that you can change the material base color values, and it changes them on here. And they weren't automatically updating until I started mucking with uh, the values here. So for example, I've got, if I play this, it should animate this base color property to glow. Yeah, so we see that. And that animation also doesn't, oh, how do I have the building selected? There we go. So you can see that you can actually animate the color property on something to make it glow, for example. So I might want to, so what I did was I adjusted the colors here. Could be there as well. I can take this and I can make it longer. Okay, now we're seeing the colors change. Seemed a little finicky, kind of weird. So yeah, but the point is that you can animate more than just size, scale, or size, rotation, position. You can animate like most anything that is a component on things. So you can see that there's other properties here as well. You know, you could animate if a collider is a trigger or not. But let's see. Something more interesting to animate might be something like a light. So if I were to click this directional light here, actually, let's create a new light. That's, for example, a spotlight. If I had a spotlight and I created I'm doing something I probably shouldn't, which is just randomly creating stuff. But you can see all of the light properties, like the intensity or the color or the size, those can be animated. So you can animate all kinds of stuff, not just I think we tend to think of animating motion, rotation, position, stuff, but you can actually animate all kinds of properties, and that can be really, really useful. And it can really bring a scene to life if you animate things and give them motion, and sometimes you want them looping, sometimes you want them, like those coins. You might want moving platforms to animate back and forth. That's something you have to be careful with, actually, in regard to how you're using physics in your game. But essentially, so we went through all of this. We went through animating material properties. And so if you would like a challenge, using a game that you've been working on or something you've created or one of these example projects, try out creating animations, things that either draw attention to something or create some kind of gameplay, and you can do that with either just an animation clip, like we did with the coin, or you could have things switch animations using animation states. And if you create a build and share a link in the class Discord, then it's a way of sharing it with other people and getting feedback. Wow, that's old. May 21st. Oh, interesting. And we have a little bit of time, actually. Let's see, we have 15 more minutes. And so there's another thing that you can do with animations that's pretty cool. Let's see. You can actually trigger things using animation. Like, it can be really useful to have a timeline like this that you can do things with. Like, let's say for our door controller, and we have our, let's see, actually not our door controller, but our door itself. Let me try to click on our door. All right. So say that, for example, we have this door, and it's got an animation that causes the door to open, which we've seen working already. But let's say we wanted a creaking noise to happen at a very specific point. So we can trigger audio we're like, well, wait, we don't have a way to control an audio property from here. Well, you can actually use what's called an animation event to trigger something. If you put this, let's say that as the door is opening, we're saying like, oh, it creaks right about here. Put the cursor where you want the creak to occur, and you see that you have this button here called Add Event. It's right next to Add Keyframe. And if you click it, you get this little thing up here. And over here, you see Inspector Function and no function selected. So that's a way that you create a marker in the timeline. And what's cool is you can even move these around. So if you need to do something where you trigger certain events and certain things need to happen in a very precise sequence, which very often happens in games, you can use an animation to do that. And so the way that you connect this animation event, it's occurring to me that this might have actually even changed since I did it last. Play sound effect function, let's see. Let me see if did I have any notes on how I even do that? I vaguely recollect how I did this. Let's see. More animation events. Yep, play sound effect. So yes, I have a script attached to that thing. That's what I think I think I remember how this works now. So for example, if I click this door, let's say I create oh yeah. So on the door itself, let me create a script called door animation events. And for some reason it jumps over here, which isn't terribly helpful. And so on the door, I'm going to take and I'm going to drop this door animation events script onto the door. So the door now has its own script, door animation events, since the animator that has that marker is on it. And if I create, well, first thing I have to do is I have to open door animation events. And if I create a public function, like public void play creaky noise, that's not what I wanted to do. We'll do this. Kind of making a mess. Try that. And then I can do debug.log creaky noise. So what happens is the door now has that script on it. And because the animation that's on it also has this marker on it, I should be able to find that function. Yeah. So play creaky noise. And so what should happen now is at the point at which this animation, let me drag the console over here. So at the point at which the door animation gets to this marker, it's going to trigger the function on this door animation event script called play creaky noise. So let's see if that actually works. So if I walk over here and I triggered the door, you saw it took a second. That's because it was waiting to get to the point where that trigger happens. And so of course it's like, oh, well, you have a debug statement or whatever. But what I can do, is I can set it up like I've set it up in this. So if you add an audio source, which is how you play audio clips, and you get the audio source, and then you get you get this creaky noise sound effect. When it wakes up, it'll set the reference, and then it'll say audio source, play one shot, We'll play one shot, the sound effect, and you get creaky noise. But you can do that for anything, is the point. It's not just audio. That's the cool thing, is that these events, you can see it's even telling me now that's the play creaky noise event. If you wanted a bunch of different things to happen and you were capable of triggering them from a script, then you could have these animation events call different functions in order, so that you might have like a series of different things happening, and they don't have to be audio. It could be visual effects get played, audio clips get played. It might trigger like the UI to update. It could trigger other things to happen, and that's a really useful way to sequence things happening in order. So I've undoubtedly stuffed your brain full of all kinds of crazy stuff. And probably you might even need to refer back to this video to try to go through it again. You saw some of the common pitfalls, but in general, it can be really useful to learn how to animate in Unity, and a lot of these things will transfer to a program like Blender, or other animation type programs. Things like keyframes, easing in, easing out, all that stuff. Complex animations you'll probably do in a different program like Blender and import them. But simple animations like this, there's no reason not to do them in Unity. And it can add a lot of life to your games, to your scenes. And of course, this works with 2D as well. So essentially, that's it. Don't forget, next week there's no class. I'll send a reminder in the Discord. I'll also remind you about the last class, which happens the week after. And then we'll submit our final projects onto the Discord. And then one of the things that is happening in January is Global Game Jam, which I really encourage you to be a part of and join your first game jam, because that can be a great way to practice your skills and meet other people. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the class. Catch you next week. No, not next week.